The imperial palace was a sprawling sea of vermilion walls and golden-tiled roofs, glowing under the luminous, round face of the mid-autumn moon inside the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The air was thick with the scent of burning ambergris roasted duck. And sweet osmanthus wine, musicians played the guzheng bells, creating a lively backdrop for the empire's elite. At the prestigious front tables sat Grand Chancellor Li and his wife, their faces glowing with pride. Between them sat their daughter, Lianren. She was a vision of innocence in a flowing, cloud-pink hanfu, her hair styled in elaborate loops adorned with pure white jade magnolias. She was laughing softly, her eyes crinkling like crescent moons as her father playfully piled more delicacies onto her plate. A few seats down, hidden in the shadows of the secondary tables, sat Meili. As a shoe-daughter born to a lowly concubine, she was forced to sit behind the legitimate lineage. Her eyes burned with a venomous envy as she watched Anren. Tonight, however, that envy would turn into triumph. "Sister Anren," Meili said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "to the Mid-Autumn Festival, and to your everlasting beauty." Anren smiled brightly, entirely devoid of suspicion. "Thank you, Sister Meili." Anren raised the jade cup to her lips, the sweet, fragrant aroma of pears teasing her senses. The rim touched her bottom lip. Then the world stopped. The lively chatter of the hall faded into a dead, echoing silence. The heavy, sweet scent of imperial incense suddenly turned ice-cold, smelling faintly of stagnant water and decaying earth. Behind the blissful, unmoving Anren, the air warped and fractured. A terrifying specter materialized out of the shadows. It was a girl, identical in face to Anren, but entirely hollowed out by tragedy. This was the Ligui, the vengeful wraith of Anren's past life. Her skin was as pale as moonlight, clad in a tattered, ash-stained gown. Dark, dried blood dripped from her hollow eyes, and her fingers, worn down to the bone from years of brutal palace labor, twitched with a violent, unnatural hunger. The ghost glared at Meili with a malice so profound it could freeze rivers. "You will not break her again." The specter's silent scream vibrated through the spiritual plane. With a sudden, violent lurch, the ghost lunged forward and melted into Anren's back. Instantly, Anren's gentle, soft posture vanished. Her spine snapped perfectly straight, and her movements became stiff, operating with an eerie, mechanical grace to the mortal eye. It looked as though the young lady had simply lost her footing. Anren clumsily lurched forward. The heavy, embroidered hem of her pink hanfu tangled beneath her feet. With precise, supernatural calculations, she stumbled directly into Meili's table. "Ah!" Anren cried out, though the voice sounded faintly layered with a hollow echo. Tables rattled. Silver plates clattered. In the frantic flurry of billowing silk sleeves and frantic apologies, the world seemed to slow down. As Anren fell forward, the ghost unleashed a localized burst of unseen telekinetic malice. The jade cup in Anren's hand and the identical cup in Meili's hand lifted slightly into the air, perfectly swapping positions in the blink of an eye. Anren crashed gently into Meili, spilling the wine now perfectly safe harmlessly onto Meili's lap. Anren blinked, the icy chill vanished in a flash. Replaced instantly by the warmth of the banquet hall, she came out of the brief trance completely disoriented, rubbing her temples. "Oh dear, sister, I am so terribly sorry," Anren cried, her face flushing with genuine embarrassment. She quickly began dabbing at Meili's skirt with a handkerchief. "I don't know what came over me. My foot simply caught. I am so clumsy today." Meili, annoyed but secretly thrilled that Anren had still managed to drink before the collision, forced a smile. "It is quite all right, sister, mistakes happen." Meili greedily picked up her own cup, unaware it was the drugged one, and downed it to soothe her agitated nerves. Within the hour, the trap sprung. But on the wrong bird. A sudden commotion erupted from the imperial gardens. Servants gasped, and guards blocked the walkways, but the whispers could not be contained. Intrigued and horrified, the guests spilled out into the courtyard. There, under the bright moonlight, Meili was caught in a scandalous, highly public, and completely shameless embrace with the third prince. The effects of the drunken dream had stripped her of all inhibition, and she was clinging to him wildly before the entire court. The emperor's face turned the color of charcoal. Furious at the blatant breach of royal etiquette and the utter disgrace brought upon the imperial family, he slammed his hand onto his throne. Before the night ended, an imperial edict was coldly issued. To preserve a shred of dignity, Meili was to be wed to the third prince immediately, not as a proper wife, but as a lowly, disgraced consort. The next morning, the sun shone brightly over the Grand Chancellor's manor. Anren sat in the peaceful courtyard pavilion, the gentle morning breeze rustling the bamboo trees. She was happily munching on sweet, warm osmanthus rice cakes, her fingers sticky with honey. Her mother, the Countess, sat beside her, still sighing with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety over the previous night's madness. To think such a scandalous thing happened right under the Emperor's nose, thank the heavens you were safely by our side. Anren swallowed her rice cake and smiled innocently, leaning her head against her mother's shoulder. Mother, if I hadn't tripped over my skirt, I might have drunk that bad wine instead, Anren said with a bright, carefree giggle. The gods truly watch over your foolish daughter. While the third prince's estate became a dreary prison for Meili, filled with cold shoulders, bitter tears, and the cruel whims of a husband who loathed her very presence, Anren's world remained as bright as a spring morning. Her life flowed peacefully until a crisp autumn afternoon when she visited the mist-shrouded Qingyun Taoist monastery to pray for her parents' longevity as she knelt on a woven mat. Her eyes closed in sincere devotion, Prince Junhao, the virtuous sixth prince, stepped into the sanctuary. He had spent years on the rugged northern borders, his mind hardened by warfare, but the moment he saw Anren, the tension left his shoulders. She looked like a celestial being who had accidentally wandered into the mortal realm, her spirit entirely unblemished by the toxic politics of the capital. When she tripped slightly on the smooth temple stones upon leaving, he caught her elbow with gentle reverence, his ears flushing a deep crimson. Their courtship became a beautiful, slow-burning melody. Because propriety demanded discretion, they communicated through silent, breathless glances at court functions and secret exchanges of poetry tucked inside scroll cases. Junhao courted her with the utmost respect. He gifted her rare, hand-carved mutton-fat jade hairpins, each one selected to match her pure nature. In return, Anren spent weeks by her window, her delicate fingers carefully weaving silk threads to create an embroidered protection pouch, filled with soothing medicinal herbs for him to wear at his waist. Grand Chancellor Li and his wife observed the sixth prince's profound respect for their daughter with immense joy. Junhao did not view Anren as a political stepping stone. He treated her like a priceless treasure to be protected from the harsh winds of the world. Yet, beneath the gilded surface of the capital, a silent, phantom assassin was sweeping through the shadows. The Ligui, the vengeful ghost of Anren's past life, began to systematically hunt down every soul who had engineered her past misery. The first to fall was the imperial physician, the rogue doctor who had secretly manufactured the drunken dream, one stormy night, inside his locked and shuttered study. The candles abruptly flared with an eerie green flame. The air froze before the doctor could scream. Invisible, ice-cold hands forced his jaws open. The ghostly manifestation of the girl he had helped destroy stood before him, her bleeding eyes staring into his soul. Driven mad by horrific, localized illusions of screaming demons tearing at his flesh, the doctor frantically grabbed his own stash of deadly mercury pills and swallowed them whole. The next morning, his servants found his corpse slumped over his desk, his hands frozen in a desperate, clawing posture around his own throat, his face twisted in absolute terror. Next came Meili, driven to a state of venomous spite by her wretched marriage. Meili secretly met with underworld assassins, paying them in gold to slip a lethal poison into the food of Grand Chancellor Li and his wife. She wanted Anren to weep the way she wept. But that very night, the temperature in Meili's bedchambers plummeted until her breath turned to mist. With a deafening crack, every bronze and glass mirror in her room shattered simultaneously. The shards didn't fall, they hovered in the air. Meili screamed as an invisible force pinned her to her bed. The ghost hovered over her, her bone-bare fingers lightly tracing Meili's terrified face. The touch burned like liquid ice. When morning arrived, Meili's handmaidens shrieked in horror. Meili's once beautiful face was entirely covered in weeping, horrific, phantom-inflicted rashes that no medicine could cure. Her beauty was permanently ruined. Worse, she was driven into a state of hysterical madness. She spent her days rocking in the corner of her room, ripping at her hair and screaming frantically about a bleeding bride in the mirror who was coming to take her soul. The final retribution was reserved for the third prince, enraged by his ruined reputation and desperate for power. The cruel prince began plotting a bloody military coup to assassinate Prince Junhao and claim Anren as a war trophy. The ghost, however, struck first. During a violent midnight thunderstorm, As the third prince gathered his conspirators in his secret courtyard, the ghost channeled the entirety of her spiritual malice into the sky. She tore a freak bolt of lightning from the heavens, guiding it directly into the prince's private armory. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. The blast tore through the estate, obliterating the treasonous weapons cache and sending shrapnel tearing through the third prince's body. He survived, but the blast left him permanently crippled and mangled. When the imperial guards rushed to the burning estate, they uncovered the undeniable evidence of his planned rebellion. Furious, the emperor stripped his son of all titles, dragged him to the imperial dungeons, and sentenced him to drink a cup of wine laced with fatal Crane's red poison. The very fate he had once dealt to Anrin was now his own. Anrin remained blissfully, completely sheltered from the blood and terror. A few days after the coup was thwarted, Anrin sat with Prince Junhao in a private garden pavilion. When he softly recounted the news of the third prince's treason and subsequent execution, Anrin's eyes welled with tears. Her gentle heart ached at the thought of such violence. She reached out, her small, soft hands holding his tightly, trembling slightly. "The palace is so frightening, Your Highness," she whispered softly, leaning closer to him as if seeking shelter from a storm. "People are so cruel to one another. I am so glad you are safe." Junhao looked down at her sweet, innocent face, from his own investigations into the bizarre deaths of the physician, Meili's sudden madness, and the unnatural lightning strike. He strongly suspected that a powerful, ancient Guaya protective spirit was ruthlessly purging their enemies from the shadows. But looking at Anrin's bright, unblemished eyes, he knew she could never handle the darkness of the spiritual world. He leaned down and gently kissed her forehead, his heart swelling with a fierce vow to keep her this way forever. "Do not weep, my lotus," Junhao murmured softly, wrapping his arms around her to shield her from the world. "The bad omens have passed. You are safe, and I will ensure the darkness never touches you." The bridal chambers were a sanctuary of crimson and gold. The air was heavy with the scent of sandalwood incense and the lingering warmth of the family's joy. Anrin sat before the ornate vanity, the heavy, intricately embroidered phoenix robe cascading around her like a pool of sunset silk. Her parents had only just left, their faces etched with the kind of pride that only comes from witnessing a cherished child find their rightful happiness. Her mother had lingered, brushing Anrin's hair one last time with a comb of polished jade, whispering prayers for her daughter's long life and many sons. The room felt hallowed, a safe harbor before the new life that would begin tomorrow. Anrin sighed, a soft, content sound, and reached out to adjust the golden headpiece resting against her temples. Suddenly, the warm, flickering orange glow of the candles died, replaced by a sudden, mystical pale blue flame. The air in the room vanished, replaced by an unnatural, bone-chilling frost that crept across the floorboards like an encroaching winter. Anrin shivered, pulling her robes tighter, and turned toward the large, ancient bronze mirror that stood in the corner. Her reflection did not smile back at her dot in the polished bronze. The face was her own, yet centuries apart. The woman in the mirror wore a tattered, ash-gray concubine's robe, stained with dark, dried blood. Her skin was the pallor of a winter moon, and her hair hung in disarray. Stripped of all ornaments, Anrin did not scream. She did not recoil. Instead, a profound, aching sorrow, a grief that felt like a phantom limb blossomed in her chest, heavy and hollow. She stood slowly, her feet moving of their own accord until she was inches from the mirror. She reached out, pressing her palm against the cool, unforgiving metal. "It was you," Anrin whispered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with recognition. "You have been protecting me from the shadows. You punished Meili and you saved my prince." The ghost's reflection shimmered, her hollow eyes weeping tears of dark shadow. When she spoke, the sound did not come from her lips. It echoed through the room like a cold wind whistling through bamboo groves. "They dragged me into the mud," the ghost whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of ages. "They let me die in the cold palace while our parents wept themselves to early graves. I defied the underworld to return, to ensure your path would be paved with silk and gold." Anrin felt the hot sting of tears, and they fell, landing as bright, living droplets onto her crimson bridal robe. She looked at the woman in the mirror, the woman she once was, and saw the lifetime of suffering etched into the set of her shoulders. "But look at me now," Anrin said, her voice soft and resolute. "Our parents are alive and happy. The man I love is honorable. The villains have faced their karma, sister." You can let go of the grudge, you can step into the light. The ghost stared at Anrin, her gaze tracing the vibrant embroidery of the phoenix robe, then up to the light in Anrin's eyes. For the first time, she saw the warmth, the safety, and the love she had been denied, now fully realized in this life, the dark. Weeping blood vanished from the ghost's face, replaced by a soft, ethereal radiance. As if by divine grace, the tattered, bloodied shroud the ghost wore began to dissolve, woven anew by the threads of Anrin's own happiness. Her form shimmered and shifted until the ghost was dressed in the same glorious golden phoenix wedding gown. She looked like a bride of the heavens, finally at peace. The ghost offered a slight, graceful bow, a final gesture of sisterly protection. She smiled, a radiant expression of pure relief, and as the morning light began to bleed through the paper screens, she shattered into 1,000 glowing, red cherry blossom petals. They swirled through the room, warm and fragrant, before fading into nothingness. Anrin stood alone in the silence, feeling lighter than she had ever felt in her life. She turned back to her reflection and smiled. She was whole. She was loved. And she was ready for her future. The ghost bowed deeply, her hands pressed together in a final, traditional gesture of profound peace. As her forehead met her hands, her form began to soften, losing its solid edge against the morning light. The chilling frost that had gripped the room melted away, replaced by a sudden, comforting warmth. With a soft, breathless sigh that sounded like the rustle of silk, the spirit dissolved into a spectacular swirl of glowing red cherry blossom petals. They danced beautifully through the air, scattering across the crimson rugs and ivory tables, leaving behind the sweet, unmistakable scent of a spring orchard before fading completely into the ether. Anrin stood in the quiet room, a tear clinging to her cheek, but her heart was lighter than it had ever been. The debt of the past had been paid in full. The next morning, the capital erupted in celebration. The sky was painted with the vibrant smoke of joyous firecrackers, their thunderous pops echoing against the ancient city walls to ward off any lingering evil. Traditional bamboo flutes and resounding gongs filled the air with a lively, festive melody that drew thousands of citizens into the streets, dressed in her magnificent phoenix robes, her face hidden beneath a heavy, auspicious red silk veil. Anrin was gently assisted into the grand imperial bridal sedan, the intricately carved wooden carriage, draped in rich vermilion tassels, lifted smoothly off the ground. At the gates of the prince's estate, Prince Junhao awaited her, clad in matching crimson armor and robes. He sat atop a magnificent, pure white horse, his expression usually so stern, now softened by pure, unyielding devotion. When the sedan stopped and the curtains parted, he stepped down, extending a steady, warm hand to guide her. Together, they walked into the grand hall. Standing before the ancestral altar, side by side, they bowed deeply, first to heaven and earth, then to their weeping, joyous parents, and finally to each other. Beneath the thick folds of her red veil, Anrin smiled, her heart swelling with an absolute, tranquil certainty. She had no more shadows to fear. Surrounded by the warmth of her family and the fierce protection of her prince, she knew she was, without a doubt, the most cherished woman in the empire. That's it for today's story. The Immoral Affairs Bureau reminds all vengeful spirits that unauthorized protection of your reincarnated self, spectral drink tampering, and weaponized lightning remain serious violations of standard afterlife procedure. While we acknowledge the impressive efficiency haunting your enemies into perfect karmic justice leaves our investigations with nowhere to go, citizens are advised to avoid suspicious mirrors and like and subscribe as required under Form 88 for unlicensed happy endings.